planning and delivery. We know that lesson planning and delivery is a crucial step towards creating a complete curriculum. And earlier when we had our back to school webinar series, we had it back there. We were supporting you for wonders. And we know that it's very important to not only have the content and the planning side of the lesson, but also to understand how an effective way to deliver a lesson would be. So in the session today, we are going to go through a lesson model with you and see how you can deliver a lesson for our program Wonders. Yes, I should have mentioned that before. We are covering Wonders today. So just making sure you're in the right session. If you're looking for the Inspire session, that was yesterday. If it's Reveal, it's tomorrow. So there is a link where you can join for any of our programs for McGraw Hill. Just hit the program that you want to select. I can drop in the link for you in the chat box as well. But this session that we're going to cover today is for Wonders. And actually, this is a much requested webinar by our audience. So we do hope you find this very useful. I'll be your moderator for today, along with my colleague Hamad. He should be joining us shortly. And then we'll be here in the background to help you if you have any questions or any technical difficulties if you're facing, or just make sure you reach out to us. You can't hear us, just let us know, and we are happy to help you out in the background. Also, for today, we've got Nicole Stearns, who is joining us today from Arizona. And thank you, Nicole. It's 6 a.m. where she is right now. So she's up early for us. Thank you so much. No problem. And Nicole is a curriculum specialist at McGraw Hill, and she has 13 years of experience in elementary education. And Nicole's scope of teaching includes professional development, teacher mentoring, lesson planning and modeling, and intervention. And she's done all the amazing stuff that you can read on your screen right now. And her area of expertise are blended learning, effective teaching practices, immersions, differentiation instruction, technology, and other distance learning and good stuff. So you can read all the good stuff there on your screen as well. But we are so excited to have Nicole for us. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being here.
Welcome. You're welcome. So happy to be here.
Amazing. I'm just going to cover housekeeping slides before I hand over to Nicole. And we do recommend that you close down any high networking app like Netflix, YouTube, any gaming platform. This might affect the bandwidth of your webinar. You have the opportunity for Q&A, so make sure you make the most of it. Ask us questions in the Q&A box. Interact with the presenter as well. We will cover the question answers at the end of the session, but feel free to drop them during the session as well, and we can pick them up later. Or Nicole might just pick it up from the chat box and answer it. Yeah, we can go along that. A lot of people want to know if we will give the recording of the session. That is correct. You will have the access to the recording, and we will send it to you through the email. So you will have the recording via email. And also, if you're attending this webinar, you will get a certificate for the session. Those of you who are attending the live webinar, and this should come around next week. So wait for it in your email. You will have the certificate as well as the recording of this session. Just make sure you make the most of this session. Like I said, you can interact with us and engage with us through the chat box or the Q&A. Like I said, chat box, I would say, would be more for Nicole. Share your thoughts, comments, and Q&A box. I will be monitoring that. I will also be monitoring the chat box. But if any questions in the background, happy to support you and help you out. Also, you must have noticed on the right side of your screen where the chat box is, I've had that highlighted, the red box. It says host and panelist. If you can just click on that and select everyone, then your colleagues and peers can see your comments. Right now, your comments, if it's just selected to host and panelist, it's just us who can see it. If you could just hit on the drop down and select everyone, then everyone can see your comments and comments and attendees. Thanks a lot for the record. You're always welcome. I guess that's all from my end. Unless you have any questions from me, I'm happy to pass over to Nicole. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the drop box. So I'll let you know. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'll go ahead and share my screen and get that switched over here so that you can see I just welcome everyone. Just so excited to be the one to have this deep conversation with you about lesson planning and delivery. I also want to make sure that you have access to me ongoing. I am a national literacy specialist, and I'm happy to do this year-round, answering questions and providing support for teachers. So my email is nicole.stearns@mheducation.com. So our time is limited here, so I want to make sure that I can be a continued support beyond our time together, so that you find a happy space with Wonders and are feeling like you're able to meet the needs of your students. I also have pictured another little companion, Rex. He is also here. It's still early for him, so he hasn't fully woken up, but we may hear him. So I just wanted to let you know that I'm not alone, and he takes his personal security very seriously. So if you hear any barking, I'll try to mute myself real quickly to get him under control, and be able to continue on with our session. But I wanted to start off this conversation, really anchoring our conversation in the science of reading, because it's going to help your lesson planning. When we talk about the science of reading, we're talking about the core elements that make up strong reading instruction, and the elements required to develop skilled readers and writers. And in order to do that, I've posted here on my screen Scarborough's Rope, which is a kind of a research model that does a very nice job of highlighting two different categories: language comprehension and word recognition. And you may have already seen something like this before. The science of reading is a top of mind topic that's been kind of happening across the education community, and rightly so, because reading is such an important skill and something that we spend quite a bit of time cultivating for our students. So as I highlight here for us, I'm going to be referring back to this particular rope. So if you haven't seen this before, take a screenshot of it, because I think it's something worth thinking about. And it is, again, going to help you hone in on key elements that you want to cultivate. Now, when I talk about language comprehension, it does combine background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. When I talk about word recognition, we're talking about phonics, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. And believe it or not, there's a hierarchy of what we need to teach in order to move our students into that skilled reading and writing and develop more complexities. And so I'm going to be highlighting some of our priorities, which are getting our students to be able to decode the text that we want them to read. And if our students are struggling decoding, then we spend a lot more time in their word recognition zone of our reading development. If our students are already able to decode, then we move and spend a little bit more of our instructional time really dabbling in language comprehension. Now, we try to spend as much time in all of these every time we pick up a book, every time we teach reading. We try to dabble in word recognition and language comprehension, but there are areas to focus in on, and that's what I'm going to help you with today, to be able to hone in on those pieces that you find within Wonders, how you can identify where your students' strengths and weaknesses are, and then really cultivate some really strong instruction in relationship to that. I also want to mention that there are some key elements about how the brain takes in language. Okay, and there are regions of the brain that are associated with that. There is that frontal lobe, that phonological processor that takes in sound, right? There's that phonological assembly that connects the sound to the letter phonemes that our students are recognizing. And then there's the orthographic, and that's that lobe in the back that actually puts it all together and has our students recognizing words. And because our brain is already wired to take in language, there are some specific things we can do as teachers to help facilitate that process a lot more smoothly. And this is where Wonders comes in. With an instructional routine handbook. And this is something that in our previous trainings, we have not spent nearly as much time as we should have, connecting the dots between the how we go about teaching to and connecting it to what the brain needs to carry off good instruction. The instructional routine handbook is located online in your platform, no matter what copyright that you have. When you go to the search engine at the top where you click on that little magnifying glass, you're able, in the online platform, you're able to put in Instructional Routine Handbook, and this book is going to come up. What's housed within this resource, which I'm hoping is going to excite you, is really the keys to the kingdom. And what I'm really promoting here in this Instructional Routine Handbook that you already have is a pathway of actually how you teach every element that I just showed you on that Scarborough's rope. Notice we have all of our word work. You're going to see routines for close reading and comprehension, vocabulary. So all the things that I was highlighting in the Scarborough's rope, we have actual routines that are laid out in this Instructional Routine Handbook. I also want to make very clear that these routines are actually already embedded in your teacher's edition as well, in the narrative that we have in your teacher's edition or in the online planner that you find in our online environment. So I wanted to make sure that I'm drawing a connection here between our Instructional Routine Handbook and our how we deliver our instruction is directly connected to what our students' brains need to take on language. That's exciting. And the reason why I'm making such a big deal about this is because when we are in the midst of our teaching, oftentimes when our students are struggling, we sort of forget about the structures and the elements that we've built into the program, and we sort of go off script, if you will. We sort of start grabbing and pulling and trying anything that we can do to help our students be successful. When I want to bring you back to this Instructional Routine Handbook, the more you know about these instructional routines, the more it becomes part of your natural vernacular of how you relay instruction to your students. You're going to see that not only are these routines research-based and you're guaranteed a year's growth with utilizing these routines, but it's also going to empower your instruction so that even if you're working with students whole group, or if you're working with a small group of students, or if you're working just over the shoulder, you'll be able to move into these routines to prompt your students that directly connects with their brain. Right? Because again, the brain is wired to take in language. We just need to use research-based routines to kind of ignite those portions of the brain and communicate directly to those portions of the brain. So our students take on that language and they take it in, and the brain basically knows where to store it and has a place for easy recall. Okay. So this is a resource that if you were watching a recording of this is a great time to pause and go into your online Wonders platform and look up your Instructional Routine Handbook. It's that exciting. What's again housed within is not just a routine of actually kind of guiding you through that process, but it's also showcasing for you what success looks like. And when we talk about what success looks like, that's sort of the mystery for us as teachers at times, is how do I know that I'm being successful? And this lays out an idea for you of what it looks like to be successful. It also provides some other activities and things that our Teacher's Edition already calls out for you in relationship to the instruction that you're providing. It also has some nice teacher tips on what you can do with your students when they're struggling. And really, a lot of the suggestions are to continue to use the routine. We're going to be using these routines over and over and over again, but we're going to be subbing in new language, new words, new phonemes that we're teaching, but the routine itself stays the same. Okay, let me pause just a moment and see what kind of questions that we have coming through here. Oh, and comments. Interesting. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, this is really important. It is something that I use with teachers, every teacher group that I work with, to really become competent at these instructional routines. And when I say competent, I mean take the time to rehearse these routines with a colleague. Take turns pretending to be the teacher and the student, so that this becomes more and more natural. It becomes more and more part of your your own automaticity around your instruction. And what this is going to do for you, in addition to communicating directly to your students' brains, is it's going to help shore up your instructional time. Because what's also really important about an instructional routine is it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it blessedly has an end. And many of our instructional opportunities are not meant to last these long periods of time. Phonemic awareness and phonics instruction really are only meant to last for about 10 to 15 minutes for each of those different elements. And that's called out for you in your teacher's edition. That is actually also research-based. It's supposed to be a very perky, connected opportunity for your students. And then once that's over, then you move on to applying those skills within text and moving on to some different routines where we're applying our word work into our reading, okay? So it's going to really make your time very succinct and very purposeful. And it guarantees that you're going to be using that routine again tomorrow and the next day, in the next day. Our power for us as teachers is in our repetitiveness, right? And how well we are able to use our routines long-term for that long-term building of skill, long-term learning that we need to happen for our students so that this language sticks and that they're able to apply the skills that they learned in this grade level year to their next grade level year and beyond. Oops. Let me give you an example. This is the vocabulary routine that's housed within your Wonders program. It's called the Define, Example, Ask routine. And you know that you have vocabulary cards that go along with these routines. And this Define, Example, Ask routine was designed specifically so that you as teachers don't fall into one particular trap. And that is, and it's something that I did a lot during a good half portion of my teaching career. And that was asking my students, what do they think the word means? Did you know that that's actually kind of a no-no? Asking our students what they think the word means. In part, it's because first of all, we know that our students don't know the definition of that word, and we already know that going into our instruction. And then second of all, if you've ever asked a K-1-2 child what a word means, our little students, we forget, are very confident in their wrongness. So you're asking them to come up with a definition. So now they're actually making something up. And if you've ever seen a student who's actually had to create something from scratch, they're oftentimes very proud of their work. If you've asked them to draw a picture or, to kind of design something, they're very proud of what they've created. So when you ask them for a definition, for them, they are creating something that they are now proud of. And so talking them out of their definition becomes very difficult, which wasn't really your intention. So the Define, Example, Ask routine is designed to kind of move that completely out of the kind of the dialogue. It allows you to immediately give a definition, provide a student-friendly example of that definition, and then because we know we want to connect that word to our students and have that personal connection, we have the ask. So let me model for you what this looks like. And I've got that on my screen so that you can see. I'm going to use the word cooperate. So if I were defining for my students, I would say to cooperate is to work together to get something done. I cooperate with my sister to clean our room. Can you talk to a neighbor and tell them, how do you and your family cooperate to get things done? Now I can wait 30 seconds as my students turn and talk to each other and share some ideas. And I can call on a few students and get examples of, like, when we wash our car, that's how we cooperate to get jobs done. When we bring in our groceries, that's how our family cooperates to get jobs done. When we set the table, that's how we cooperate to get things done. So this is, how I make that immediate personal connection. And now I'm able to move directly on and actually develop now the next word, right? And now I'm not spending an extended amount of time deeply talking about vocabulary. I've planted some seeds so that they can actually build and grow, knowing that these vocabulary words, high frequency words, or any word that I might be introducing to my students, they're going to actually see those in context within the stories that I have arranged for them to experience during that week's instruction. The Instructional Routine Handbook is a K-6 resource. So it is something that you're going to actually access all grade levels. The routines that are laid out in this particular resource are in order of developmental level. So there's a lot of phonemic awareness instructional routines that the K-1 teachers are going to be using quite a bit. And then it grows from there. So you're going to see third grade and up where your multisyllabic routines are, so that your students are learning how to read 3-syllable words. But you also still have access to those routines in the event that you have students that are struggling. We oftentimes have 4th and 5th grade students who are actually reading more like a 1st or 2nd grade students, who would benefit from some of these routines to pull them forward and get them reading closer to a level where they need to be. So knowing these routines allows you the onus to be able to flip into the routines that match in with the level of need of student that you happen to be working with. There are some students in your class that are sound by sound blending, right? They're sounding out individual letter sounds to decode the word, where you have other students who are grouping together phrases, right? So they need a different type of support than the student who is sound by sound blending. And that kind of onus is really powerful for a teacher. It allows you to then turn and look at Wonders as the true resource it is, because you really have the corner on the instruction that your students need in order to be successful. It's true that sometimes when you ask students that their understanding and meaning of the word is sometimes similar or different, but in your instructional time, sometimes you don't have time to weed through all of their different interpretations. And it is okay to go ahead and give your students that definition and go ahead and lay the groundwork, so that because the goal is to experience this word in context. And sometimes that extended instructional time that we spend delving into vocabulary ends up being a bigger waste of time, because it's preventing us from actually reading the text with the vocabulary housed within, where we want them to actually make bigger connections and make bigger meaning out of the text that they're reading, not just a single word that they're exposed to. Okay. Okay. There's also, I'm seeing other questions in the Q&A as well that I can answer for you. And there is a handwriting component. And I'll make sure when I move to the online environment to showcase for you where the handwriting support is, so that you can develop more handwriting skills for the students that need that type of support. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned before, I'm highlighting again the Scarborough's rope, because now I'm going to move into, now that I've kind of laid the groundwork for which we're standing upon, now I'm going to begin to highlight how we're going to identify these particular skills, strengths and weaknesses, so that you can actually craft instructional support that really mimics what your students need to develop skilled readers. That really begins with our placement and diagnostic assessment. And our placement and diagnostic assessment, there's a print piece to it. There is also an online piece to it. So the print piece actually has a full battery of assessments. And if I go into the table of contents that I have on my screen here, you're going to see that you have informal reading inventories and vocabulary, a spelling inventory, reading comprehension. You have a whole battery of assessments that will tell you where your students are at in the different subsections that we teach, that again tap into that Scarborough's rope and directly connect to elements of what you teach within Wonders. What I want to highlight for you, and the one that I suggest that you provide for your students, especially as students of second language learners, is the Phonics and Decoding Screener. It is a K-6 assessment, and giving this assessment is going to identify exactly what phonetic sounds your students know and don't know. And it organizes it, it's actually in order by kind of what students should know by grade level. So when your students start to kind of reach their struggle area area. It tells them at what level they know their phonetic sounds and gives you an idea of where to start in terms of kind of bridging the gap or filling in the holes. So if you were working with a 5th grade student who is now who's kind of operating as more of a 2nd grader in their phonetic sounds, it gives you a very clear place to start and what phonetic sounds you need to continue working on to fill in those gaps to get them operating and reading as a 5th grader. That does the same thing in the K-1-2 environment. It tells you what kind of holes might exist for students in their language trajectory. Although in kindergarten, we make assumptions that our students don't know anything about the phonetic system. And so we are starting at the beginning. So it becomes more significant for your 1st grade and up students to give that phonetic phonics and decoding screener. You can give it as many times as you like throughout the school year to continue kind of touchboarding and kind of seeing exactly where your students are at so that you can craft instruction that's going to meet you where you live. And I'm going to show you where that extended instruction is for all grade levels so that you can be very strategic around what kind of instruction that you're providing in relationship to the comprehension skills that you're cultivating. Also notice, even though I went directly to the phonics and decoding screener here, I want you to also notice that you have the letter naming and sight words. You have a phonological and phonemic awareness of what your students are hearing when they are hearing the language being read to them, an oral reading fluency piece. So there's a lot of assessments that you can choose to give. There are directions on how to administer this assessment. There's the teacher mark page that you mark on and the student page that they're looking at. So everything that is required for these assessments is available to you. And it allows you to, again, find out exactly what your students know and don't know, so you can build a plan, an instructional pathway that really meets their needs. Part of this document and this resource, the placement and diagnostic piece, is also going to give you a decision tree, if you will. It's going to give some suggestions by grade level band, what assessments you may choose to give, and based on percentage score or how they're performing, it leads you to either giving additional assessments and also tells you what kind of level of resource your students may be better suited to utilize. So this is, again, another way that you're able to, identify very clearly what kind of supports that you'd be providing for your students as they move forward in their thinking around those resources. And I kind of really, as you're, pulling resources from Wonders to craft instruction. And in this placement and diagnostic, it provides very clear language around percentage scores and suggestions around how your students are performing. And to give you an example, if you gave the phonics survey and they were 80% correct for their grade level, then they would be approaching level. If they're below 50%, you may want to give the sight word fluency assessment to find out a little bit more about what their skill level is at, because they're struggling. And you want to find out as much as you can about your students. It helps in crafting really powerful instruction. That way you don't feel like you're spinning your wheels, constantly working on skills that they tend to grapple with, or that they're doing well with, and really off the mark of what's really keeping them from moving forward within their grade level. So within Wonders, typically you don't have access to content outside of your grade level, but the placement and diagnostic is a K-6 resource for you. The Instructional Routine Handbook is a K-6 resource, so everyone has access to the pieces that I've just been talking about. Okay, so everyone will have what they need to support their grade level. And I'm going to go online in just a little bit to show you where some of those things are located and where the online diagnostic assessments are located. Okay. All right. Now, in the teacher's edition, we have a page that outlines the outcomes for each week's instruction. And I'm showing an upper elementary grade level, outcomes page, but every grade level has a page that looks like this in their teacher's edition. for each week's instruction. And it calls out very clearly the student outcomes for not just comprehension, but foundational skills, for your speaking and listening, for your writing skills. And this is one of the places that I look to identify what skills that I'm going to be cultivating to get my students to move where they need to. In the time that we have typically in our classrooms, we have to pick strategically because there's a lot of content within Wonders in which to choose from. And so knowing where your student strengths and weaknesses lie is going to help you streamline that instructional opportunity. There may be things that you touch on that you do whole group with your students just for exposure, because they can have these out loud conversations with you about comprehension and about the text that we're reading, even though they may not be reading quite at that level. We still have these out loud conversations. We have students that aren't fully able to write incomplete sentences, but we still model writing complete sentences on our boards. We still engage them and use complete sentences in our speech, right? Even though our students aren't quite there yet. But I'm going to show you some supports and resources that may support you as you're cultivating those areas. But identifying the student outcomes after you've identified your student strengths and weaknesses will make this a glaringly obvious what you're going to spend a lion's share of your instructional time on at different parts of the school year to move your students forward. And at this part of the school year, your students guaranteed need a lot of word work. And that should be a primary focus, is the word work and applying that word work within text. And oftentimes we do that with their leveled readers. And we do that with their differentiation. So I'm going to kind of lead you through the planning process with the digital environment. So instead of using, I've been showing you screenshots of the teacher's edition, but I'm going to kind of convert to kind of our real world of how we navigate the digital platform and navigate the resources and do that with the digital. So I'm showcasing for you what I'm eventually going to show you live, which is your planner, which has all of your plans for the course of an instructional week laid out for you. And how I go about grappling and tackling different particular elements that I want to cultivate with students and how I navigate that across a week's instruction. And so I'm going to do that for whole group instruction, but I'm also going to do that for an approaching level group of students. And I've highlighted some of the key elements of what I would be honing in on for an approaching level student, which is directly connected to the word work conversation that I was having, that again directly goes back to that Scarborough's rope and ultimately goes back to the key elements of what makes up a skilled reader. Because I first need my students decoding and reading at grade level, while at the same time I'm cultivating thinking around the text that we're reading. Okay, so I'm going to toggle over to the online environment here. Just bear with me here. Okay, so I happen to be in 3rd grade in the digital platform, and I'm going to go into my weekly planner here. And so in your weekly planner, it looks the same in either copyright that you might be working out of. And so you have a weekly plan that outlays an entire, robust list of instructional opportunities. As you look at the headings here, and if go back to my Scarborough's rope model that you might have kind of taken a screenshot of, or taken a picture of, or even look up for yourselves online, you're going to see these are going to start to pop out to you, that our literature anthology, our response to reading is part of that language portion of our Scarborough's rope. And then anything that's connected to spelling and our word work, right, our foundational skills is going to be directly connected to the word recognition section of that experience. And depending upon how your students performed on your diagnostic assessments is going to dictate the time that you spend with your students cultivating that instruction. So in upper grades, you're going to find a singular place where your phonetic instruction is located. And it's typically how later in your instructional week is where you're going to find all your phonics practice and fluency support, right, in the middle of your week. So if you have a large group of students who need a lot of word work, then I would suggest going directly to your approaching level support, where your word work is profoundly located there for you. In our younger grades, K1 and 2, you're going to have quite a bit of robust foundational skill support located in your whole group instruction. And that's where I would really spend time cultivating not only me professionally in your delivery to make sure that you're using those instructional routines, but also making sure that you're spending quite a bit of time cultivating that and practicing that within the decodable text and your leveled reader, so that your students are not only building that word work, that they're moving that into a place where they're practicing and inviting that opportunity within the text that's laid out for them for the week's instruction. Those instructional opportunities would be the first thing on my list to plan and carry out. When we actually look at the instructional plan, and I'm going to just tap into a phonics instructional opportunity, notice it's going to say 10 minutes for this phonics instruction for 3-letter blends. It's going to have a nice explain, model, and a guided practice. This narrative here is an instructional routine that's laid out in the instructional routine handbook. So you're able to see it in 2 different places. You're able to see the instruction that's directly connected to the specific skill that you're teaching, but if you wanted to see it separately, kind of a clean view of this routine, you would look in your instructional routine handbook. But it's here for you, and the words that you would use to carry off that instruction and the games that you would use to practice and build skills are also laid out for you here, along with the practice pages that you would utilize to carry off that instruction. So these are the tools that I would utilize to carry off some really sound instruction. And I would do my phonetic skill instruction in the order that it's laid out in your teacher's edition. So let me go back to your weekly planner. I'm beginning with my phonics skill of 3-letter blends, and then I'm moving into a practice book opportunity for closed syllables, since that's something that we've already explicitly taught. And then building in the fluency practice opportunity is also there, which is going to apply 3-letter blends and closed syllables in that opportunity. Okay. So your resources are really all kind of working together already for you. So really the hard work is in getting you to practice your delivery of that instructional opportunity. Again, I can't tell you enough how it's going to change the way you think about how you plan your instruction when you know your instructional routines. Notice I didn't open up the teacher's edition and start kind of going directly to, how everything's laid out. And first we read the close reading routine. And first we do the, reading, writing companion. I didn't go in order. I'm thinking more strategically about where my students are at and what they need. I'm going to be able to circle back in the second half of my reading instruction after I've done my word work and actually apply skills and then tap into my reading and writing comprehension opportunities and skills that I'm developing by going into and utilizing my reading, writing companion for some of you, or your reading writing workshop text, where you're actually cultivating your shared read opportunity. That's the second part of your kind of your instructional time frame that you spend with your in your language arts instruction. So I'm seeing it as 2 different halves of your instruction, just like in Scarborough's rope, thinking about that language development and that word work. But because the word work tends to be the piece that keeps our students from reading at grade level, I like to start with that word work first and then lead into the language development where I'm cultivating comprehension skills and vocabulary. Does that make sense? Yeah, there's just a wealth of information housed within this digital platform, and there's just a lot that can be housed there. So much so that we hear a lot from teachers that it's overwhelming. So I'm hoping the conversation that I'm having is taking you kind of through a linear pathway so that you can see more clearly your purpose as you're using this resource to unlock reading opportunities for your students. So that's an interesting comment that you made, Mona, about we need to let students solve the games without having a group class within Wonders. I don't know if I'm reading your statement correctly, but you know, these games that you have access to can be used in a couple of different ways. And so you can do them as a class, or your students can do them independently. So it just really depends on teacher preference. There really are no rules about that. There are a couple of games that we have within each of your units that actually collect data. And those would be the ones that your students could do independently. And I'm going to navigate over to the resource library to begin showing you some of the tools, some of my favorite tools that I use to cultivate the instruction. One of which, since I'm talking about games, is to scroll down to a section called Student Practice with Data Reporting. These games, depending upon what grade level you're in, are going to cultivate your phonetic sounds. There's going to be some phonetic and oral language skill sounds or games. And then there's also going to be comprehension skill strategies that are going to be cultivated here. And I happen to be middle of the road, third grade. So you're seeing a lot of the comprehension skill and vocabulary strategy activities that are here. K1 and 2, you look a little bit different. You've got some of these kinds of games, but you also have word work games that are worth assigning and collect data. This data that's collected, if your students are accessing this in the digital environment, you'll be able to access all of that data in your data dashboard. And so you're going to be able to see that data right along with your assessment data to help you make decisions around what your students need moving forward. And it is, again, I can't say enough about how your data is what's going to really help you in crafting really great instructional opportunities for your students. Yeah, so these learning games make it fun. You know, your students are going to think that they're still learning, but you're capturing data behind the scenes to kind of allow that opportunity to just be another way that your students really show what they know. Okay. I also want to toggle over. I'm going to go back to all categories here. And I want to showcase for you that you have something housed in your dual language section that I really enjoy learning and utilizing. And that's in dual language. You have a couple of really neat resources, but one of which is something called oral language sentence frames. Okay. Oral language sentence frames. And this is significant for students that are third grade and up. Oral language sentence frames. There's something else, and I'll pop into second grade to showcase what you have. Your oral language sentence frames, I'm going to double click on that just to open it up for you. Took me out of there. So I'm going to just switch my share so that you're able to see it here. In this oral language sentence frames resource, it actually has sentence frames that you're able to use, not just in your language arts time, but across an entire instructional day. It has sentence frames for using verbs and noun phrases, things that we encounter each and every day, whether we're in our language arts or we're in content area time where we're working on science or social studies or any other portion of our instructional day. It has 3 different language level of acquisition opportunities. So if you ask your students to express and exchange information, you have 3 different versions of that. The circle version, meaning it would be the beginning version. The square is your intermediate, and your diamond is your more advanced version of that support. So every sentence frame that we provide, we've got 3 different versions of that. So when I ask our students to share information or ideas within a story that they've read, these are the sentence frames that I could project on my board, so that as I'm providing guidance for my students to write and complete sentences, instead of painfully asking them to come up with their own, I can provide a crutch. I can provide a sentence frame bridge to get them there. My students then are required to respond orally using these sentence frames, and then they're asked to write these sentence frames. After a while, you're going to find that your students won't need those sentence frames. It's going to be part of their automatic vernacular. And wouldn't that be lovely if their go-to is to write, just a few of these sentences as their kind of their go-to way of communicating, right? As I continue scrolling down, you've got ways of talking to an adult or ways of talking to a peer, and you've got 3 different versions of that. You also have asking and answering questions. Notice the more, advanced version has a lot more blanks for your students to fill in. That's on purpose. So as your students grow in their ownness around their own language and become more comfortable with their own vocabulary, this is going to become more doable. This is something that even in the US, they're using for English only students as a frame to guarantee that we're getting some good structured sentences for our students. It's difficult to continue to be working on vocabulary and constructing sentences. These are 2 different skills that our students are cultivating at the same time. So I am kind of leveraging one and providing an ease of passage for that grammar while we're building that vocabulary. I'm also going to be teaching grammar skills, but I'm going to, when I'm actually getting them to do some writing and getting them to actually express that orally before they write their own sentences, this is, again, a really great tool to use. Again, it's called oral language sentence frames. Yeah, I really find it to be a game changer and something that is going to help, I think, transform the student writing that's occurring already naturally in your classrooms. Okay. In younger grades, I do think you have something very similar to the oral sentence frame, so you're not left out, but you have something. These are grade level banded, so there's a K1, 2, 3, and then there is a 4, 6 version of this, so depending on what grade level. Again, I found this in a section called dual language. There's some other pieces that I want to highlight for you, and that is in this section called dual language, you also have a language development practice opportunities, these practice cards, and they're actually development practice. There's an answer key to the practice pages, and then language development cards themselves. When I go into these language development cards, and I just open them up, and I'm going to just toggle my share again so that you can see them clearly. This is directly connected to the grammar that we're teaching. These grammar skills are, they're also grade level banded. So there's a K1 version, a 2-3 version, and a 4-6 version of these cards. It has all of the grammar skills that you would be teaching, but what we've done in this resource is organized it in a very structured lesson format that's very popular for teachers. So this is above and beyond what's housed in your teacher's edition when you're teaching grammar, that really just, quite frankly, just speaks to teachers. And I'm all about, making sure that you have access to resources that have you sounding and able to lay out instruction beautifully the first time around. Right. And so notice this instruction is laid out in a very clear I do, we do, you do opportunity that's going to support you when you are deciding to teach your grammar skill. You've got a very clear instructional pathway. You've got opportunities to model, corrective feedback, and opportunities for written practice that you can provide for your students. There's an actual practice page that goes along with that that's called out for you in the corner of this document. And this language practice development is found on the same page that I had located these cards. It's right next to it. And these practice pages also there's 3 different versions. There's a beginning, there's an intermediate, and there's an advanced version of practice pages for acquiring these different grammar skills. So again, it starts in the order of how we introduce our grammar. So it starts off with different sentence types and then moves very quickly to subjects, predicates, right? And some of the other nuances of the grammar that's what part of what makes English a little bit more challenging. So you've got all of this at your fingertips. And I think, again, another game changer. So as you are crafting your instructional experience, pulling your word work instruction that you're going to do, the grammar skill that you're going to be doing, and the practice that you'll provide for your students. And then I'm going to be getting to the comprehension that you'll be engaging in with your students. It's all going to be there for you in this environment. Okay, so I was in a section called dual language. And when you click into dual language, you're going to see language development cards. That's what I just showed you. And the practice pages that go with that are directly next to it, called language development practice. There are other wonderful gems in this section, but those are the three things that I think that are really worth your time and your energy. I'm going to go back to all categories. So now I'd like to talk to you a moment about comprehension. Within Wonders, we develop that in two different ways. And I happen to be in the 2020 copyright and not in the 2017 copyright, which I know some of you are. So some of you are using the resource called the Reading Writing Workshop book that has all of your shared read. And a question that was asked was, what's more important? And it's really about purpose. So I'm going to grab some resources here real quick. Sorry about that. All right. So some of you are using the hardbound, a reading writing workshop, or you're doing that online, and that has what we call our shared read. And then there's also, everyone has access to a literature anthology. And my 2020 users are using a resource called the Reading Writing Companion, which also has the shared read. The purpose of the shared experience is a place for you to model how we go about closely reading. This is significant because all of the students that continue to struggle reading at grade level need this modeled conversation, okay? They need this modeled conversation. It's a place where we can give our answers away. It's a place where we're kind of engaging our students to help us think through the story. And so when we are doing that, we're setting the stage for the kind of thinking that's required at grade level. This is not designed to take an extended amount of time. So when you look into your lesson planning, you're going to see it's no more than 15, 20 minutes tops that you're spending within this particular story and resource on any given day. Now, we are modeling out, a comprehension skill and strategy. We are showcasing how we are able to cultivate that from that shared read. Again, this is all part of that guided experience, highlighting for our students what's expected at grade level. So when I'm using this resource, I am not actually teaching to mastery. I'm teaching for exposure of the skill of what's required at grade level. I've got a whole group of students in front of me that are reading at different levels than what I have represented in my hands here at this moment. And so once I've laid out the foundation of what we're going to be building on and working on within the week's instruction, then I, as the teacher, get to decide whether or not the best move for my students is to go directly to the literature anthology, which is also another piece of text that is at their challenge level, or should I go directly to the leveled readers, where it is a little bit more modified for my students and gives them an opportunity to grapple with that skill, but at a Lexile level that's a little bit lower or maybe a little bit higher than what they are originally been exposed to, depending upon their level. I get to make that instructional decision. And that's the thing that oftentimes gets lost in this expanse of Wonders resources, is that you are the practitioner and you get to decide on what would be the best course of action. Some teachers choose to go directly to the literature collection within the anthology piece. Some teachers choose to go directly to the leveled readers. What all teachers have access to is this leveled reader database that allows you to choose texts that are lower or higher than their grade level. You have access to the full K-6 library of leveled readers to meet the needs of the students that you're working with. So when you go into your leveled reader database here, you're able to choose different grade levels. You're also able to choose by skill so that you can still stay true to the skills and concepts that you introduced here in your shared read experience, but expose your students to, say, a kindergarten level book to practice those same skills. Does that make sense? So you have a full range of texts that you get to use to move your students forward. Now, the goal is not to continually give them something that's lower than and easy for them. The idea is to get them comfortable so that you can continue to push and stretch them so that they can continually be exposed to our range of leveled readers, which are not really designed to be a just right book. If you've noticed, the approaching level is still quite challenging. Our on level is still a bit tough. There isn't anything super easy about these leveled readers because we're still pushing our students to think. And so we want them in that perpetual state of struggle, which oftentimes feels a little bit difficult for us to bear and witness, but it's intentional because we're trying to work that brain, which is a muscle that needs to be pushed. And so we do that in small increments of time. So we don't spend this extended amount of time, hours on end working in a leveled reader. We spend 15, 20 minutes in a leveled reader or in any text because we're stretching them and working them hard, making them think about the text, helping them decode the language that's there. And then we move on, knowing that we're going to continue building these skills day after day, using the same instructional routines day after day, because we're in the long game of retention, a long game of building lifelong readers. Okay. Let me check the thoughts and comments here that I'm getting. Oh, so there's been a conversation about online learning has lowered levels, especially writing skills. And so when I'm talking about writing, I'm actually talking about putting paper to pencil. I'm talking about some, really, taking the time to actually have our students write out by hand their sentences, develop those motor skills, and craft, the skill of writing, and providing them a range or supports for crafting some really strong sentences right from the beginning. One of the unique things about writing within the Wonders environment is that from the very beginning, within our writer's notebook or any of our writing instruction, and I'm going to go into back to the keyword here and into our writing section, is every time we're asking our students to do any type of writing, we're actually asking them to write like the authors that they've been reading. And that oftentimes gets lost in our conversations. So when you are in your reading writing companion and asking students to write in response to what they're reading, we're really asking them to analyze what this author has done and pull out the language that that author has used to convey an understanding in preparation for them getting an opportunity to do their own writing and inviting them to write like the authors that they've been reading. And we do the same thing in the reading writing companion as we are crafting and asking our students to write in response to what they've been reading. We constantly get these opportunities to take on the vocabulary that these authors have been reading or have been using, to take on their style, to take on their descriptive language and use that within this environment. So when we talk about, process writing, we've got a lot of online support pieces here. But one of the things that I think is Wonder's strength is that when we go into the writer's notebook, a resource that you could actually assign to your students, there's an awful lot of support on how to go about cultivating a better writer in the process of writing. It's designed to give us quite a bit more time to develop each of the different phases of the writing process. And if you've been teaching for any length of time, you already know what your highest functioning student writing looks like and your lowest functioning student writing looks like. My job is to affect their writing so that it improves across the school year. So as I do that, I have these resources that allow us to kind of really dig into that process and invite an opportunity for that peer review opportunity where they're allowed to be messy in this process as they move from draft, revise, and ultimately edit. And so if you haven't used this resource, it's a little bit different than, using a Google Doc where things are, auto-corrected and things are, auto-saved for you in this space. Here, your students have to purposely save in this environment. They have to cultivate and change their own writing in this environment. And so that might be something to think about when you're cultivating the different genres of writing that you would be writing across your school year, knowing that if we're writing a persuasive essay, your students across their leveled readers, their shared read, their literature anthology piece, they would have been reading persuasive essays. So they're embedded there. So they'll have this exposure and now an opportunity to write in response to what they've been reading. The writer's notebook, let me go back, is in a section called writing within your resource library. So when I go into writing and that category, within that section, I've got a line item called workshop. And you have a workshop for every genre of writing that you teach within the program, and it's organized by unit for you. So you'll have everything that you need within this environment, including all of your anchor papers, all of your revise and edit support pieces are all available to you and your students in this environment. Okay. All right. I don't know if I saw your question. You said, if you can answer my question, I need it. Trying to go back to your question here. Oh, for English learners. So you want to see what kind of supports we have for English learners. Okay. So for our English learners, I'm going to go back to all categories. One of the things that we have for our English learners is, of course, you have a leveled reader that's dedicated to English learners. It is, and I'm going to go into your leveled reader tab here. Any one of the books that are outlined in purple are for your English learners. It's designed to support the addition of vocabulary and the idioms within the English language. But I want to be very clear that within any 1 week of instruction, that your students, your English learners, should be exposed to not only the purple version of a leveled reader, but also the orange version of your leveled reader, because they're both written for two different purposes. The purple is designed for the nuances of our English language, whereas the orange is for students that are newly learning to decode our language. And you've got students that are actually in both spaces. So they need exposure to both of those leveled readers each and every week so that they can grapple with new vocabulary and the nuances of English. And then also, and so I'm going to open up one of these so that you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm opening up first an English learner leveled reader. And again, I'm in 3rd grade, but this lives the same across all grade levels for you. Within the text itself, you're going to have a support piece called In Other Words. So it's going to call out, some kind of key language phrases that we use. A vacation spot would be something, would be a very, English, kind of phrase to use, and provides a deeper understanding of what that would mean. Let me go a little bit deeper. You're going to notice that you've got a lot more vocabulary called out in the pictures that are highlighted here. The language is not simplified. This is still on grade level text, but it has a lot more learning or kind of language support and language detective. So it calls out, beaches, the plural form of beach, and kind of gives more of a connection to the vocabulary that's being used here. When I go back to the platform and open up the approaching leveled reader, you're going to see that the approaching level reader is written for a student that is struggling decoding. So it is a modified piece of text for students that are, so even though this is a 3rd grade leveled reader, it is really written for a student that is reading a year and a half behind grade level. So there's less words on the page. The sentence structure is a little bit more simplistic, designed for students that are still struggling decoding. So you don't have the same language call outs, but the text itself is more simplified. Okay. And again, English learners need access to both. Within your teacher's edition itself, you're going to see purple callouts for all of your English learner supports. So you're going to see that ever present, and also sort of at point of use. I'm trying to think of the best way to show you that. I'll go back to our lesson planner. Within each of your lesson plans, let's go into, like, say, the literature anthology. You do have supports for English learners. Here, let me see if I can find a purple box that pops out here. Close reading, newcomers, differentiated reading, and English learner support is also here for you. So we put it in the margins. In your teacher's edition, we put it in more of a purple box where it calls out the kind of support that you might provide for your students. Another place that you'll access English learner support is in your leveled reader support. Your English learner has instructional supports for the literature anthology, and every piece of text that you read with your students, from your leveled reader to your literature anthology, is all here for you. So you can click on those specific lessons that are designed for, and depending upon what level of need your students are at with their English language acquisition, you've got beginning prompts, intermediate questions, or advanced or high prompts that you can use. So there's different layers of support, and this is another great place to go for instructional support for your English learners. Now, within the resource library, I already showed you the dual language support, where we found the oral language sentence frames. We also, I showed you the grammar support as well. There are newcomer resources if you have a student that's brand new or has missed school and is their ability level is more like a newcomer. You do have newcomer resources that provide just some basic English language skills to get them operating at a on level. You also, because of the learning loss that we have experienced, I think, around the world due to COVID and some of the interruptions that we experienced, we've added a section called Learning Loss Recovery. And this is designed for any student that needs some additional support. And so we've added an additional level reader called the Apprentice Leveled Reader. It takes the leveled reader, the approaching leveled reader, and takes it even another year below grade level. So you've got an even easier piece of text that you can use. Notice instead of an orange band, these have a yellow band. And again, they're called our apprentice leveled readers. So if I went into, I'm going to go into berries. Again, this is the apprentice leveled reader. It provides something even lower for students. Again, this is 3rd grade, so you can see it's quite a bit lower than the approaching level I just showed you, even though it's not the same story. It gives you an idea of how much lower our leveled readers can go for you in the online environment to support students, again, to get them where we need them to go. So this curriculum definitely gives students the skills of an English reader and writer. And so this is the same curriculum that we're using for all of our students here in the US who are not attempting to try to learn a second language. This is the core curriculum that they're using in our classrooms across many of our cities. And so there's a lot of Wonders users that are using Wonders to teach English to our English only students who only speak English and only have English being spoken to them in the home as well. Yeah, so the apprentice level really provides just another bridge, just another place to go. Yeah. So Dylan, I think that's a really good comment that you said. Teachers really struggle finishing the whole curriculum. And I want to impress upon you, and it's partly why I started with the instructional routine, is that the goal is not to finish all the curriculum. The goal is to use these resources to move your students forward, and how you pull and plug and craft your daily work with your students using these resources is uniquely up to you, the practitioner. There are no rules about, doing unit 1 all the way to unit 6. We're really trying to craft instruction that really meets the needs of our students, and doing every single thing within the program is really not the goal. The goal from the publisher's perspective is that we provided a full range of resources so that you could pull from to meet the range of need that happen to exist in a classroom. Whether you use all of these pieces is not really the priority. It's really designed to be there for you when you need it, to have additional resources and stories and practice pages and activities that you can lean on when you need them. That was really the design of the program. So if we move that out of our vernacular in terms of trying to finish and think about the instructional routines and crafting really sound instruction that continues to move our students forward, and then as we're assessing our students, we're finding those holes and filling them as we go along the way, then we're going to feel a lot more successful, and you're going to really find yourself using Wonders more strategically and really right along the lines of the purpose of it in the first place. So the leveled readers, let me go back to the leveled readers. Someone asked about the different levels. So we have yellow, which is an apprentice leveled reader. This is new to you, and all grade levels and all, with the exception of kindergarten, doesn't have apprentice leveled readers. I believe K and first don't have apprentice leveled readers. You actually have additional decodable text that you'll be using. So it's really second grade and up that have these apprentice leveled readers that are yellow. Orange is approaching. Blue is on. Purple is your English learner. And your green is your beyond level. So you really have 5 ranges of leveled readers to support students. Blue, again, is on level, and green is beyond. Okay. Okay. So let's talk a moment about digital. Some of you are really asking about just navigating the digital and seeing if your students have access to digital. Part of your purchase, and it might have been access for students. I don't know that for sure. We've got a wide audience of folks with us today. So you would need to check with your school sites to see if you purchase licenses for your students to access. The student platform itself, and I can toggle out out to model that for you is directly connected to the teacher through your planner. So when you set your planner to be on a certain unit or week's instruction, when your students log in, and let me just click out and log into a student version of that, just as an example. I've got a couple different copyrights here. I'm just going to pop into just a student version, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So the student version looks very similar to this. So, but of course, it's going to match up with whatever cover of book that they happen to be using. And you're going to see these icons here that directly connect to what you're doing within your week's instruction. This is what the student platform looks like. In order to make sure that your students have access, they would need to log in very similarly to the way you do with their own username and password and access the content. What's really nice is that if they're connected to your calendar, that means when they click on read, it gives them all the stories that you'd be reading for that week's instruction. So you don't have to assign it to them. If we talk about games, all the games that coincide with every skill that you're teaching in that week's instruction, intuitively, they immediately have access to those pieces. So, and the same with vocabulary and anything that you might assign to your students, they would actually have immediate access to those. There's a nice school to home piece that directly connects your families at home to what you're doing in school, connected to what you're doing this week. So they have access to additional activities for word work, comprehension, their spelling list. They would have access to all of those pieces in their environment. So that would be one reason to make sure that your students have digital access to their Wonders experience. It allows them to continue visiting and reading and listening to the stories that you've been engaging them with during your school day, which is a wonderful way to spend their home time, revisiting those stories with their families, listening to those stories, reading right along with our actors who are reading these stories to practice their own fluency. Okay. Now, I'm going to toggle back over here to my Connected and pop back into my teacher content. And I want to reiterate for you that when we are assigning things to our students, there's two different places that we're assigning. And when we are assigning our students a particular task, like any of these printable resources, I can identify those right from here. I can click this cog wheel and I can assign this particular resource. There we go. And I can click assign. And when I assign a particular resource to my students, it's going to show up here in my manage and assign, and I'm able to see their work in this space. Now, one of the benefits of the 2020 users is that we've moved a lot of the assignable practice pages into the online assessment center. So now you have your practice pages, you have a folder for all of your practice pages. So you have all of your grammar, your phonics, your spelling, your vocabulary for the week are now something your students can complete digitally. The system automatically scores it just like an assessment, and it's added into your data dashboard, and you're able to, glean a little bit more data from your students. But if I assign just a black line master, those assignments would be found in my assignment manager, and I would actually need to look individually at each of those practice pages, score them myself, and record those scores in someplace else, since our Wonders doesn't have a developed gradebook feature that you probably like. And Gradebook just, quite frankly, it isn't our thing. We're a curriculum folks. We are, we've got the corner on the market on instruction, but some of those other ancillary things like Gradebook and things are not our strengths, to be quite honest. So it is not something that's developed here. So when you assign something that's outside of the assessment, that's not auto-scored, you then have to go to your assignment manager. You can look at your assignments by assignment or by student. But one of the things that I want to call out is that if you created an assignment back in Unit 1, Week 4, that's where that assignment is going to be housed. It won't move forward with you. So if you're looking for a previously completed assignment, you will need to go back to the original week or unit in which you assigned it, and then you'll be able to access that assignment and then see all the students that have maybe either have completed that assignment and see and actually be able to click in and see their work. Now, in this particular, my demo account, I have all these students, but no one has done this particular assignment. But it's just a nice example to show you that I have to go back to where I originally assigned this. It was our attempt to prevent this from becoming this monster list of assignments over the course of the school year. So we organized it around unit and weeks instruction, hoping that makes sense and maybe is hitting kind of what you're looking for. Okay, so if you're not able to see the assignment, Lisa, then you may want to go back to the unit or week that you originally assigned it, and that might help you locate that assignment. If you're still having trouble, we do have, a tech support that can that can help you, and I think my colleagues can help. I don't know if it's the same tech support that we use. I can put that in the chat. Okay. EPG Tech at mheducation.com. If there's, so for some reason, there's some sort of miscommunication digitally between teacher and student with your assignments and you're not able to see it, they're able to go in behind the scenes and kind of root out what difficulty you might be having, and kind of get to the root of the tech issue that's there. Unfortunately, that's not me, but I can at least kind of lead you to as far as what you're supposed to see. And then if you're not seeing that, then we have a problem. Okay. Got some other questions here. How can you give direct access to learners to practice the games independently? Well, first of all, your students would need to access their own account, right? They need to go into their own platform. And then, of course, once you set your calendar, they're already going to have access to those games. And then they're able to do those games independently of you. Okay. No problem. Okay. All right. So one of the things I want to make sure, I went into assessment, but I want to go back and revisit the placement and diagnostic assessments. Want to make sure that you understand where those are located, since I anchored quite a bit of my conversation around that. So when I go into assessment and data to find the online assessments, you'll notice that you have a section called screening, placement, and diagnostic. This is where your universal screener is, which is a combination of comprehension and grammar. You have a spelling inventory and a comprehension diagnostic piece. If you like the idea of the phonics screener, that is only a person-to-person assessment. So it's designed to be printed off, and that you do have to give that one-on-one with your students, because you need to hear them saying the sounds that they think that they know. Okay, so that one, it really cannot be done digitally, but there's some others that can be done digitally. If you want to access the printable version of your placement and diagnostic within your assessment and data, you'll go to printable assessments. And within printable assessments, you have a line item called screening, placement, and diagnostics. And here they all are. So you have pages worth. It's really one big book that we broke up into subsections that you're able to go into and find that phonics and decoding screener and access that resource. Remember, it's a K-6 resource, so it's the same assessment that you would give to all grade levels that give a nice, good understanding of what your students know about the English sounds that they're employing to make their words and to create and craft their own sentences and read text. Okay. I also need to circle back. I'm just relooking at some of the questions, and one was around handwriting. And so let me show you where the handwriting support is located. So I'm going to go back into my resource library. And when I scroll down in resource library and go to student practice worksheets, within student practice worksheets, you'll notice that you have an item called handwriting practice. This is the space that I would go to for your handwriting practice. I want you to notice that there is a teacher's edition along with a workbook. And then the teacher's edition that's annotated that obviously gives the answers. But the very front piece of this handwriting is also just developing motor skills for your students. So drawing lines and developing and moving across the page, and how we move from, left to right would be important. So this is a part of that experience. I'm in third grade, so it's focusing in on cursive handwriting. In my younger grades, you're going to have access to handwriting itself and printing, if you will. Now, even though you don't have access to the other grade levels, these download as a PDF. So if you have a colleague that is a K1 and you happen to need some print resources for printing, just simply ask them to download it and email it to you, and then you'll have the printing version of that. I apologize that we don't have, don't make it available, for all grade levels, everything, but kind of it is what it is there at this particular moment. But you've got quite a bit of practice that's embedded here in either grade levels. Okay, just double checking to make sure I've answered everyone's questions here. How are we doing on time? I feel like we've gone a good 90 minutes here, I think, right?
That is correct.
So I don't want to keep you, and I know it's your evening, and it's of course my morning, so I'm like, woo! But I really have enjoyed my time. I'm hoping that this was valuable for you, that I gave you a real true vision around how to look at your Wonders material, how to improve your instructional delivery with the Instructional Routine Handbook, and thinking more strategically about how you craft your instruction and what you pull to meet the needs of your students using the assessments that are available to you.
Thank you, Nicole. That was indeed a very packed session, and it was fantastic. I learned so many new things. Thank you so much.
Very good. Good. Very good.
I'm just reading the comments. Thank you so much for your valuable training. I really enjoyed it. I appreciated that you made it fun. So good. Thank you so much. At this point, I know the time is up, 90 minutes, and you're free to leave if you need to. But can I just ask Nicole to stay back a few minutes if you're free to answer any questions if everyone has?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Anyone has any questions? I know you've covered all the questions that came along, but any other burning questions anyone has, then we can just answer that. And this is the opportunity that you can open up the floor. You can ask us any questions. Otherwise, yes, I know it's 6:30 where I am in Dubai, so we can leave. That's fine. And I'm amazing. Thank you so much for being here. No questions, I guess. Thank you, Nicole. I guess you've covered all of them while we were there.
I did. Oh, well, very good. I'm very happy. That's great.
At this point, I just want to remind everyone that this was a Wonder session, and we have multiple sessions that are running in. So I'm going to drop the link to all the model lessons. I know if you're not using the program, then absolutely fine. But if you're looking for, like, let's say Inspire, which was yesterday actually, but you can still join for the K5 session that's tomorrow, Reveal Math K5. So you can join that, or you can look back at the recordings, anything like that. How can we get the recording? We will be emailing you the recording. So I'm just going to close it by letting you know that you will get the recording of this session, even if you attended or you did not attend. You will get it regardless. So if you registered for the session, but you missed a session, we'll still share the recording with you via email. And you'll also get a certificate of participation for this session as well. And I'm sure, Nicole, the session was amazing because the participant list has not dropped. We're like 168 people.
Oh, wonderful.
But thank you so much, everyone. You were fantastic for the engagement and everything. And we'll see you soon for our next session.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I really, really appreciate for everything that you did today.
You. Okay, thank you.
Take
all right,
care.
so I sign off. We're all done?
Yeah, we're all
okay.
done.
Okay.
Take care.
Well, thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.